Kלים Perik Yud Mishnah Ches. And now I think you're all familiar with the first word of this Mishnah, Kazayis. This is the shir we've all been waiting for, the most famous, the most popular of all shurim. And this is a long Mishnah. If I would have written the Mishnahs, I would have actually split this Mishnah into 4 little Mishnahs. But here we go. Bear with me and I'll make it as succinct and as pleasurable as possible. Kazayis Sha'omru. Loi Godol v'loi Koton. Not a very small olive, not a particularly big one. Elo beinoni, an average olive. Now, there's a lot of discussion amongst the Rishonim and Achronim as exactly what a kazayis is. At the end of the day, a kazayis varies somewhere between half a beitza or a third of a beitza, and a few options in between. The shir of a kazayis is actually independent of a beitza, and therefore, because now we have an assumption that the skatnu habeitzim, eggs are actually much smaller than they used to be, the kazayis actually now is much nearer to the shir of a beitza than it used to be. And maskana of the poskim is that a kazayis is actually very similar to a beitza, however, a beitza kalufa, a beitza without the shell on. The relevance for a kazayis. Of course, the kazayis is the standard shir used for all mitzvahs aseh, for instance, eating matzah on Pesach night, or mitzvahs loisasa, the issa deraisa to eat a piece of chazo or macholas asuras, is always a beitza, is always a kazayis. Similarly, the relevance would also be for tumah. Tumas meis, the shir is with a kazayis. Another nafkamena would, for instance, bali roya, bali motzah on Pesach, the shir is a kazayis. Haktorah on the mizbeach, shir is a shir of a kazayis in most instances. And there are other cases of tumah with negoim, and it's a very much of a worldwide shir. And the Mishnah says, this zayis beinoni, this medium-sized olive, zehu eguri. Now there's again a difference of opinion in the Mefarshim if eguri is a shir d'oraisa. This was a special type of zayis which Moshe Rabbeinu was told about in Sinai. But the Chazon Ish comes to the conclusion that the word eguri was just a type of zayis which was found, which people knew in the times of Chazal. They used this shir of an eguri to tell people what sort of a zayis they should be looking at. In other words, the eguri zayis was equal to your normal zayis beinoni. And the Mishnah carries on with the next one, Kis'oira she'omru, the shir of a soira. Not as popular as a kazayis. A soira is a barley, a little piece, a grain of barley. The main shir, the main relevance to the shir of a soira, of course, is with tumas meis of an etzem, bone of a dead body is matame if it's got the shir of a soira, matame b'mago of a masa. In this case, the shir of a soira is being used as a volume. And the Mishnah says, Loi gadol v'loi katana, it's not the big barley, it's not the small one, elo beinonis, it's the average size barley. Zumid boris, this was the barley of the wilderness, the wild barley. So it's primarily used for a shir nefach, a volume shir, when discussing the tumah of an etzem kisoira. However, although it's used as a volume shir, in the case of tumas etzem, it's also used in a complete different context. It's also used as a weight. It's known as, the Chazal say, this is a weight of a 16th of a mo'ah kesef, of one of the silver coins. And that now the soira becomes very important to find out the weights of silver in the coinage used in the Torah and in the Gemara. So if we know that a piece of soira is a 16th of a mo'ah kesef, we know the relationship to mo'ah, to a pruta, and all the coins, therefore we can know this is relevant to the shir of Kedushin, especially to the shir of Kedushin, and therefore it has a very large effect, a very big effect on severe diuresis, knowing when a Kedushin is chal. That's relevance number 2 to a soira. And it's a third way a soira is used. Soira, so we've had a soira for volume, we've had a soira for weight. Soira is also used for length. The Rambam writes in Perik Tes and Halacha Tes, Hilchas Sefer Torah, that when you measure a tefach, when you measure the agoidal, the shear of one of the fingers used up to make up a tefach, again it's measured 7 widths of a soira, or 2 lengths of a soil. They happen to be the same size. In other words, 7 widths is the same as 2 lengths, 2 pieces like this, or 7 like this, and that's the shear of an etzbah. And again, the Mishnah says Zumit Boris, that's the midbar one. And the third shear the Mishnah is going to discuss is Ka'adasha, a lentil. Ka'adasha sha'omru. Again, this is a shear this is a volume of the lentil. Lo gedola v'lo katana, not a big one, not a small one. Elabain is the average lentil. Zu mitzvahs, this was the Egyptian lentil. The main thing this is used for is for tumas sheretz. One of the 8 shrotzim that are dead is metame. A bit of the sheretz is metame. How much of the sheretz is metame? The size is the volume of an ad. Now the adasha is not only a shear of volume, it can also be used as a shear of area. This is in the area of negoim. The nega must be the size of a gris. A gris is defined as 9 adoshos. It's a circle or square of 9 of these lentils. The michya inside, which is the piece of raw skin which renders the nega tome, must be the size of an adasha. Each adasha is the size of the area of 4 hairs, 4 sauras. In other words, you take, the poskim can say, the forearm of the body of a typical adult male. Look at the way the hairs on his forearm are spread. Take 4 of those hairs, the area that 4 hairs take up, that is an adasha. And the Mishnah carries on with the last din of the Mishnah. Kol hamataltalin mivin es hatuma ba'ove hamardea. We had this word mardea before. We had it in Perek Tes Mishnah Zayin. Mardea was a pole used for driving the cattle, known as a malmad habokar. It was a round pole. And we're now dealing with the basics of tumas meis and the oholos aspect of tumas meis. As we know, if you have an ohel, which is a tefach, a square by a tefach by a tefach above the ground, that's called an oil and is able to move tumah along from one end of it to the other end. If tumah finds itself under an oil, then the oil is maybe tumah to all the underneath of that oil. Midoraisa, that oil must be a tefach by a tefach. Chazal made a gezerah, and they said that if you have a round pole, which is actually a tefach in circumference, although you haven't got a tefach of width, if you do a cross section of the pole, it's only going to be a third of the tefach. Midorabonon, that round pole will be maybe tumah from one end to the other end. The details of this din you will find in the beginning of Perek Tes Zayin in Mesechta Oholos. Says the Mishnah, all movable objects can bring tumah, but oivei hamardea, as long as they have this thickness of a mardea, that means as long as they've got a thickness of a third of a tefach, although midaraisa you need a whole tefach, but because of the rule that when you have a third, when you have a whole tefach around, a circumference of a tefach, that's a third of a tefach. As al gozer, even though you haven't got the diameter of a tefach, because you've got the circumference of a tefach, that's enough to bring the tumah. What sort of mardea is this? Lo godol v'lo koton elo beinin. The average mardea, and the chatamis of Chazal says the Mishnah ezu beinoni. What's a typical average mardea? Kol she keifoy tefach. If you have a circumference of a tefach, meaning that the cross section, the diameter of the mardea is only a third of a tefach, midrabanon, that brings the tumah all the way along the mardea. And once we mention the word tefach, which is the last word of the Mishnah here, let's just recap the rules of tefach. Tefach, the Gemara describes, which is, everyone knows tefach is this, it's basically either 4 thumbs, or it's 6 little fingers, 6 winkies next to each other, or it's 5 regular fingers. That's the shear of a tefach, and that brings us on to the next Mishnah, where we're going to be dealing, of course, with the Amma.